The U.S. Summit for Democracy, a lot of people are pointing out just at face value how everything about this makes no sense. It does not add up. You have a summit for democracy that is unilaterally organized by the United States. The list of attendees is unilaterally decided upon by the United States. And even the definition of democracy itself is defined by the US and the US alone. And the last time I checked, nobody voted for the US to be global arbiter of what is and isn't democratic. So at face value, there's nothing democratic at all about the Summit for Democracy. It is another smokescreen for the US to use to try to reassert itself over the rest of the world, which is actually the opposite of democracy. It is dictatorship on a global scale. But that's not really what I want to talk about. I'll have another video about that coming out at the end of the week. I want to show you this. Taiwan to participate in U.S. Summit for Democracy as China snubbed. Now, the problem China has with this is not that it wasn't invited. I don't think that it cares. The problem here is that Taiwan is part of China's territory. It is a rogue province that is trying to break away, especially under the current government, and the US is helping them do that. Now, people will say, no, Taiwan is a country. It is not. And some people will say, if that's what the people of Taiwan want and that's in their best interest, why can't they pursue that? And I will make a case as to why it is not in their best interest and how this has been put into their head and how it was put into their head by the US, which most certainly doesn't have a say in Taiwan's future and most certainly does not have the people of Taiwan's best interests at heart. Let's take a look at this article. This is Voice of America, U.S. State Department media, and they say Taiwan will take part in a virtual U.S. Summit for Democracy this week after countries like China and Russia failed to make the list of attendees, and another sign of American support for the East Asian democracy. And there's nothing democratic about the current government of Taiwan. The president, Tsai Ing-wen, was put into power by the US, not the people of Taiwan, and her push for independence for Taiwan does not benefit the people of Taiwan, but instead Washington and Wall Street, and Washington and Wall Street alone. Taiwan is also not a country, and Voice of America even admits it, because who's going to represent Taiwan? It's the de facto ambassador to the United States. You don't have a de facto ambassador if you're a real country. You have an ambassador. And who else is going? The digital minister, Audrey Tang. And again, this is really China's problem, alongside representatives from more than 100 countries and global institutions. And Taiwan is not an institution. It is also not a country. But if you had to pick one or the other that was most appropriate, this is what the U.S. is doing. They're de facto trying to include Taiwan to portray it as if it was a country. Now, what is the problem with this? Because I always get people all the time claiming that Taiwan is a country. It is independent. It is not. And not even the U.S. recognizes it as such. This is the U.S. State Department's official website, state.gov, right up here. U.S. relations with Taiwan. The United States and Taiwan enjoy a robust unofficial relationship. If it was a country, they would have an official relationship. Taiwan is not a country. The 1979 U.S. People's Republic of China joint communique switched diplomatic recognition from Taipei to Beijing. In the joint communique, the United States recognized the government of the People's Republic of China as the sole legal government of China, acknowledging the Chinese position that there is but one China and Taiwan is part of China. And they also say that the American Institute in Taiwan is responsible for implementing U.S. policy toward Taiwan. Not an embassy, because Taiwan is not a country. So instead they have AIT. It also very unambiguously says the United States does not support Taiwan independence. It also says down here, the United States insists on the peaceful resolution of cross-strait differences, opposes unilateral changes to the status quo by either side, and encourages both sides to continue their constructive dialogue on the basis of dignity and respect. And what is the current government of Taiwan doing right now? Tsai Ing-wen and Audrey Tang and others in the Democratic Progressive Party that is currently in power. They are unilaterally trying to change the status quo and move Taiwan closer and closer toward independence, directly in contradiction to the US's own agreement that they made with China. And at the time, China was in no position at all to force the US to do anything. The US made that agreement on their own free will, and now they are blatantly violating it. So again, you're having a summit for democracy, and you're wagging your finger at the rest of the world, and you yourself are shredding your own agreement you made with another country by inviting Taiwan and treating it as if it's a country, when your own official position is that it is not a country. It gets worse than that, though, because there's also articles like this. Taiwan confirms U.S. military presence, says defending island is vital for democracy. This is the U.S. and Taiwan admitting that there are U.S. troops stationed in Taiwan. And, you know, people will say this is ambiguous. We're not really sure what the U.S. meant by acknowledging the Chinese position that there is but one China and Taiwan is part of China. But even if you want to interpret it as the US doesn't agree, but they acknowledge it, you putting your troops in Taiwan is you knowing that you're doing it with China perceiving that as their own territory. It is a blatant provocation toward war, is what it is. It's an act of war, and the US knows this. And so they're pushing every button they can to provoke a conflict with China. Now, what I really want to talk about is Audrey Tang. I want to explain to people how she does not actually represent Taiwan. She's going to this summit as a representative of Taiwan, but she does not represent Taiwan. She represents U.S. interference in Taiwan. She represents the aspirations of Wall Street and Washington for Taiwan, not that of the people actually living there. And how do we know this? First, let's get a little background about Audrey Tang right here. This is from Haaretz. My agenda is officially whatever. The anarchist minister from the future who's redefining democracy, Audrey Tang, a transgender anarchist hacker with an IQ of 160, left school at 14, started her first Silicon Valley startup when he was 19, and is now the youngest minister in Taiwan's history. Let's go down here. This is what I want to zoom in on. The first project Tang undertook was the Gov Project. Gov Project, if you substitute the number 0 for the letter O in the URLs of government sites ending in .gov.tw, you will get an alternative site that offers the same services but in a more interactive and user-friendly way. What if I told you that this was not actually an initiative created by and for Taiwan, but sponsored by the U.S. government, by and for the U.S. government, so that it can fully infiltrate and control Taiwan's political system, and more specifically by doing it through controlling information? How is technology bridging the gap between government and citizens in Taiwan? This is from Democracy Works, the blog of the National Democratic Institute. The National Democratic Institute is a subsidiary of the National Endowment for Democracy. It is part of the US government's regime change arm. It took over from the CIA back in the 80s. It channels money into political systems all around the globe, including Taiwan, so that it can be transformed to serve Western interests instead of the people actually living there. And so that's what they're talking about here. And if you go through this, here is Derek. Derek is the president of the National Democratic Institute. Thank you, Audrey. It's an honor for NDI to be your partner. What are they talking about? To be their partner, because the US government is working hand in hand with people like Audrey Tang to reconfigure the entire political system in Taiwan. For what? For what? To respond better to US interests. This is the Gov website right here. This is the Gov website right here, and it was featured in a video by the NDI called Taiwan's Disinformation War, and I will put the links to all of this in the video description below so you can see for yourself. And in this video, almost 10 minutes in, is this map, Code for All, our members. So these are all of the members of this Code for All. There is Taiwan's Gov, this project by Audrey Tang, the digital minister of Taiwan, part of the government. Who do you think funds Code for All? Who do you think funded Audrey Tang's first initiative? Right here. Supporters. Code for All, financial supporters, National Endowment for Democracy, NDI, Omidyar Network, this Soros-type billionaire who the U.S. launders money through when it's too sensitive for the U.S. to do it directly. And of course, the Taiwan Foundation for Democracy, which is an offshoot of the NED. And they have staff working in both organizations. There's like this collaboration constantly going on. Taiwan Foundation for Democracy is an extension of the U.S. government inside Taiwan. Its hands on the most sensitive levers of political power in Taiwan. It's just, it is naked imperialism. Is the U.S. directly controlling Taiwan's government for its own purposes and to the detriment of Taiwan, the people of Taiwan's best interests. And then the Code for America, which is a subset of Code for All of these people are from big tech in the U.S. or the U.S. government or both. And if you think that that's not enough, I will show you where Audrey Tang herself admits that the NDI is funding initiatives in Taiwan directly involving Taiwan's government. So there is this website, and it is a Taiwanese government website, Say It. And it's got all of these speeches. And if you come down here, here she is, Audrey Tang. They're talking about different lines of defense against disinformation, but what they're actually talking about is any information that derails U.S. interests in co-opting and controlling Taiwan's political system. And so they say, this is her saying this, thanks partly to NDI's contributions, is essentially a crowdsourced community that does fact-checking. So you have the U.S. government fact-checking political news in Taiwan. Just think about the implications there, the complete obliteration of Taiwan's sovereignty and any notion that it has any sort of national security. It's because it's not a country, and it is a captured appendage of Western imperialism lingering in East Asia, all but just completely occupied and run by Americans. If we go back to the beginning, we go back to Taiwan to participate in U.S. Summit for Democracy as China snubbed. Now you can see what's really going on here. It's not a summit for democracy, it's a summit for American imperialism. And they're inviting in all of their captured, coerced, not only countries, but politicians and representatives, people who represent the U.S. in their respective countries, the interests of the U.S. Being imposed upon their respective countries. Audrey Tang is just one of many who will be showing up at this summit. Everything that she has done since she got into power in Taiwan as a minister, digital minister, has been underwritten by her own admission, by the U.S. government, through the National Democratic Institute. And I already can hear people saying, Brian, the National Democratic Institute, just listen, it's got the word democracy in it. How could that be a bad thing? It's a bad thing because it's not really about democracy. It's, you can name anything that you want. Doesn't mean that it's really about democracy. They called the illegal invasion and mass murdering of hundreds of thousands of Iraqis Operation Iraqi Freedom. Had nothing to do with freedom. So let's take a look at the board of directors of the National Democratic Institute. Look at who's the chair, not vice chair, the chair, Madeleine Albright. Speaking of Iraq, she was the one who said,
she says the U.S. is trying to prevent Saddam Hussein from making and dropping a nuclear bomb or chemical weapons on other countries. And she says he's still lying about his weapons programs.
We have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And you know, is the price worth it?
I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it. It is a moral question, but the moral question is even a larger one. Don't we owe to the American people and to the American military and to the other countries in the region that this man not be a threat?
Starving 500,000 Iraqi children to death was worth it because she wanted to disarm Iraq of nuclear weapons she knew Iraq didn't have, and as a pretext to grind Iraq into the ground for refusing to subordinate itself to the United States, to the unipolar international order the U.S. proclaims itself leader of. That's who Audrey Tang and many others all around the world, that's who they're taking money from when they take money from the National Endowment for Democracy or the NDI or any of its subsidiaries or adjacent organizations. These are the people who are running these organizations, war criminals, people who are guilty of the worst crimes against humanity of the 21st century. And they're going to say they're doing it for democracy and human rights and freedom. And these are organizations and people who are involved in doing the exact opposite. Finally, one last thing that I want to show you is why people out there saying, you know, Taiwan, if they want to be independent, why can't they do that? They don't want to be independent. That idea is being put into their head. They are part of China. Their own constitution says they are part of China. They are not some sort of separate country. They never were and they never will be. And I will explain it in very simple terms. This is where Taiwan's economy exports almost half to China, between mainland China and Hong Kong. And then their next closest, largest trading partner is the United States. If Taiwan was to declare independence tomorrow and China stopped trading with them, their economy would collapse. Everyone in Taiwan would be hurt. They would be hit hard. And there would be no way to recover from that until they got over this nonsense, this nonsensical idea of independence, came back to the table and continued returning themselves first to the status quo and then moving together down the road with mainland China. Just like the United States said they would allow Taiwan and mainland China to do, but clearly is not doing. There's no way the United States, look at this, mainland China alone accounts for more exports from Taiwan than North America, Europe, Australia, all of these countries and regions combined, before you even throw in Hong Kong there. It makes no sense. There's absolutely nothing about independence for Taiwan that makes sense, except for the way it helps advance US foreign policy. Audrey Tang, the Taiwanese digital minister, is a representative of everything that is absolutely wrong with Western so-called democracy and how it is just a smokescreen for modern day imperialism. If you thought this video was useful, please like and share it. Think about subscribing to the channel. It's free to do and it helps the channel grow. I have a website, newatlus.report. Please bookmark it, share it with others. You can find and follow all of my work there. There are no ads, there are no paywalls, there never will be. I'm also back on Twitter for the time being, @Brian_Berletic. You can find and follow my work there. In the video description below, you will find all of the links that I just was talking about in this video. There are also ways there that you can help support my work. And to everyone who is, whether it's month to month through Patreon or one-time donations, or even if you're just helping share my work with others, this is all greatly appreciated. I could not do this work without that support. So thank you. And as always, thank you for watching.